What I've noticed with managing online courses is that there's so much more of responsibility on my part to communicate with the students as much as possible. In class, if a student asks a question, everybody hears the answer. In an online class, I might get an email from a student or two, and not everyone sees the answer. So I have to put a lot of time and effort into creating spaces where we can have question and answer sets, to allowing students to contact me and then sharing those answers with the class regularly so everyone can hear the answer.
If you're teaching, an on-site face-to-face course and you're someone like me who has a lot of experience in these things, you begin to feel like, and this is, this may not be right, but you begin to feel like you can just walk in and do it and wing it. And if there's a problem on something like on the syllabus, you can always tell the class, hey, there's this error on the syllabus, fix it. Or you can change things about your grading standard, perhaps at the very beginning on the syllabus. And maybe you can just walk into a class day by day and, without doing a lot of long-range thinking about what you're going to be doing. And with an online class, that just cannot be done. You have to plan things well in advance. You can't just wake up the day before the term begins and say, hey, I'm going to teach an online class, because it can't work like that. You have to prepare, months ahead of time to make sure that things are in place for these students.
One of the biggest things that I've learned is that there can often be a lot of technical issues with exam due dates and homework, accessing the online homework systems, and simply accessing the Blackboard course management website that we use here at Ball State. And so I've had to be flexible with my due dates and check email judiciously so that I can fix those issues as soon as I can. With an online asynchronous course, there's not as much interaction with the students as we might have on an on-campus course. And so I feel like I need to fix issues as quickly as possible so students can move forward and learn what they need to do. So I've had to change different due dates and kind of jigger with the exam settings to make sure that they work properly.
I use different methods to engage students. First, the obvious one through Blackboard is using the discussion boards. And I require students to make at least 2 quality posts per week. Now, the kicker for that is if you require that, to engage students, you as the teacher really need to make sure you are responding to those posts so that the students don't just feel like, oh, I'm just putting these out there, nobody's really reading them, I'm just doing it. They don't really care what I say. The students really need to see that you are paying attention to their posts and you are responding. A second way that I engage the students, and I encourage them to do this also, is every once in a while just throw out something fun, maybe an article you saw or a cartoon or a joke or something to keep things light and lively, or maybe a funny video. And one thing I have seen through the discussion board posts is that oftentimes students will include videos or links to something interesting. And so those are things you always want to make sure you respond to. And then another thing that I think is really important in engaging students is to use their names when you respond to them. Because you don't necessarily have that face-to-face, and by using the students' names in your emails or in your discussion board replies, it shows them that you are paying attention to them as individuals and that you are making a good faith effort to have a good relationship with your students.
My courses really revolve around the students. Students watch lecture videos, they complete readings just like any other class, but they engage with each other by writing texts about those readings and videos and then discussing what they've written with each other. To discuss what they've written, the students sign up for Google Hangouts, and the students tell me their availability. I form Google Hangout meeting times based on their availability. And at those meetings, I expect the students to explain what they wrote, explain what they read, and answer each other's discussion questions about the material.
They have a measure of independence taking this online course, but that puts a lot of responsibility on the instructor to be prepared to foster that student's independence in taking that course.
There is nowadays very little difference between teaching in a blended format or teaching 100% online. And as we increase more and more online resources for our in-campus classes, there may be a moment where before we notice, we are probably more online than in campus, at least in terms of the content we deliver. So once we become very used to the blended format, the transition into 100% distance ed, it's easier. Going from 100% lecture room or studio environment to distance ed can be very challenging because the protocols are different. But blended formats help us mediate. Something I usually advise my faculty to try before jumping into full distance ed is to experiment with blended formats and increase the component of online content.